Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, you referred to me as a senator from Charleston, and I want to say to this chamber and to any who are watching that I have never been more proud to be referred to as a senator from Charleston than I have since this great tragedy occurred. I believe that Charleston and our state has demonstrated to a watching world how to respond to a tragedy, an unspeakable tragedy like occurred at Mother Emanuel Church, and to our friend and colleague, Clem Pinkney. Our community and our state have responded in that way, frankly, because I believe we followed the lead of that congregation and of the family members of the victims of that shooting. They set the tone for the response that the world really is amazed at. And their response, and you also look at the Walter Scott family, and you look at their response as well. It's utterly amazing. It's inspiring. I can tell you it has inspired me. I wrote an op-ed about this issue of why we should remove the battle flag from the State House grounds. And basically, when I began writing that op-ed, I didn't know if that was the position I was going to hold. But I wanted to present the best argument in light of what the response has been from the victims and the family and the congregation in Charleston, and just sit back and see if I could live with it. Well, I can tell you, after I finished writing it, or in the process of writing, I probably broke down crying 4 times. At the tragedy, yes, but also at the incredible response and the manifestation of sincere Christian forgiveness and charity that those who've been left here on this earth to deal with the tragedy have demonstrated. And as a senator from Charleston, where this occurred, as a fellow believer, I was utterly in awe of the faith of these people. And I'll tell you what, I regret that Clem is not here, and that I did not express gratitude to him while he was still on this earth, because the reaction that those members of that church had is a reflection of him. It's a reflection of him as their pastor, as their shepherd. It's a reflection of him, his heart, his intellect, his theological insight, his pastoral care and leadership. What they did is a reflection of him. I regret that I don't have an opportunity to once again to thank him for that. It's really one of the most amazing reactions I've ever experienced in my lifetime. And I quoted last week from a speech, I quoted one of my favorite Christian philosophers, theologians, former atheist, by the way. I want the world to know that C.S. Lewis used to be an atheist. He wrote a book called The Pilgrim's Regress, a pun on John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. And by the way, Pilgrim's Progress is the second most read book in the Western world to the Bible. The problem is John Bunyan doesn't have a blog. People don't read him anymore. The world would be a better place if they did. C.S. Lewis said he was pulled kicking and scratching into the kingdom of God, resisting the entire way. A brilliant mind who argued against his existence, but yet he was pulled kicking and scratching into the kingdom and became one of the greatest spokespersons for Christianity in the 20th century. And in And the quote that I used that touched me, that I think is relevant to this situation, I'm going to say it again. C.S. Lewis said, "To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you." To be a Christian means to forgive the inexcusable because God has forgiven the inexcusable in you. And the world looks at what's happened in this state and in Charleston, and there is no human explanation for it. The only possible explanation that makes any sense at all is captured in that quote from C.S. Lewis. Clems himself, the members of his congregation, the family members of the victims, they understood, because of his teaching and his shepherding and his theological acumen, they understood that God has forgiven them of much, and therefore they're capable of forgiveness. Now, when I sat down to write my op-ed to help me discern what position I'm going to take on this, as I reflected upon the charity and the grace, the forgiveness, the peacemaking, they stood against outside agitators that would come in and try to create violent reaction to this. They expressed even charity to the murderer of their family member during a bond hearing. Forgiveness and even charity and concern for their souls. Amazing people. Utterly amazing. As a member of the Senate from the town where that occurred, I could not let that go without a response. If they can be peacemakers in those dire circumstances, the circumstances are the worst possible circumstances that any human being can encounter, if they can be peacemakers in the midst of that, I determined I can be a peacemaker when it comes to a flag flying on our State House grounds. And I decided I can do that even though I don't concede most of the, probably all, but certainly most of the arguments, most of the dispersions cast against that flag. I don't accept them, but I do acknowledge this, that at times, as the senator from Richland indicated, it has been expropriated by those who would seek to politically divide us and those who would seek to physically harm us. At times it has been expropriated. That is an illegitimate use of the flag. But because of that illegitimate use, there are some in our state, our citizens of South Carolina, who are disconcerted by it, in fact, even find it offensive. I do not find it offensive, but I know that some do. There are many who cast dispersions at it that are not valid, but I know that they are sincerely held by some of those people. And in the name of peace and unity, and last week I quoted Romans 14:19, I'll quote it again, pursue peace and mutual upbuilding. In that spirit, as Paul encouraged us to do, and being inspired by the fruit of Clem's ministry that we're seeing at work and play out on the world stage as a witness to the veracity of their faith, I'm willing to accommodate and acknowledge that it is disconcerting, offensive to some citizens, and therefore I'm willing to relocate it to pursue peace and mutual upbuilding like Paul encourages us to do. I think that's an appropriate thing for us to do. This is about South Carolina. This isn't about outsiders who would come in and seek political advantage or racial division and try to foster even violence from this. My focus is on what should we as South Carolinians do? People in our own community, our own friends, our own neighbors, our fellow brothers in Christ who have left the great legacy that I wish I'd have known how great that legacy was when he was here for me to thank him for it. You want to know the mark of a man, you look at the legacy he leaves behind, that he left behind. I hate that it took a tragedy like this for me to really fully understand that. But I do fully understand it. And it is utterly amazing. It's one of the greatest testimonies to the Christian faith that I've experienced in my life. I love theology. I love reading C.S. Lewis. And I love theology as much as I love reading the Founding Fathers. Y'all might be shocked at that. But I do. But I've never seen such deep theology implanted in people's lives and manifesting itself before a watching world in such a powerful way as what I've seen. And that demands a response from us. And this is the least that I can do. This is the least that I think the state should do. This isn't about me, it's about the people I represent. But Charleston has, the night, Sunday after the murders, Sunday night, my sister and my wife went on the Bridge to Peace event Sunday night on the Ravenel Bridge. 3.5 mile long bridge. At least 15,000, some say 20 to 25,000 people showed up on the bridge holding hands, crossing the entire span of the Ravenel Bridge that reaches, the towers reach over 600 feet into the sky. And I'll never forget, my sister said she was there on the top of the bridge, and a man whom she didn't know, I don't know, but he just spontaneously, as everyone was holding their hand, screamed at the top of his lungs, raising his hands towards heaven, spontaneously said, "This is how we riot in Charleston." You see, Charleston could have been another Ferguson. It could have been a Baltimore. You know why it wasn't a Ferguson and it wasn't a Baltimore? Because it happened to Christian people who had a deeply held commitment to their faith, who acted consistent with that faith. That's why. If it weren't for the example they set right off the bat at a bond hearing, when they had a chance to address their loved one's murderer, if they had not set that pace at that moment in time, who knows what would have happened. I can't let that go without an appropriate response. They have inspired me. And I also want to say this. I think it's very important that we relish this moment, that we don't erupt into additional debate about other matters. But Senator from Richmond, you mentioned the senator from former senator from Charleston, president of the College of Charleston, Senator McConnell, who came out with a very eloquent piece in support. And of course, he is a big Southern heritage guy, as we all know, and we all know he is very gracious, not a racist bone or cell in his body. All of us who've served with him know that. But he did say something in that piece that I think is important for us to just contemplate, and that is, I think it's important that we do this, but I think it's important that we not in the future engage in campaigns to eradicate monuments and other things around this state, because, you know, like McConnell said, there's no end to that. There are thousands upon thousands of battles that could be fought. The monument at White Point Gardens to the Southern defenders of Fort Sumter, the Confederate Soldiers Monument itself. It's important for us, all of us, to acknowledge that this symbol has been expropriated, the battle flag. It has been expropriated illegitimately. And this is a response to that expropriation, and in light of the inspiring behavior of Clem's congregation and the victims of this murder. But I pray that we don't in the future devolve into the type of monument by monument, symbol by symbol battle that former Senator McConnell encouraged us to avoid, because there'd be no end to that. And I think that would be very divisive on into the future. You know, we have a rich history here in South Carolina, not just a rich Civil War history. You know, we had the first victory over land and naval forces in the Revolutionary War, the Battle of Sullivan's Island. We have the Palmetto Log and the Crescent on our flag because of that battle. The Palmetto Logs that soaked up the shot from the British fleet, 13 British warships, 6 days before the signing of the Declaration of Independence. William Thompson's sharpshooters from Calhoun County, defending the north end of Sullivan's Island against over 2,000 British Marines at Breach Inlet. The first decisive victory in the Revolutionary, really before the Revolutionary War. We have a rich history. It's important for us to commemorate and memorialize that history, not to try to sanitize it, not to try to make it something that it's not, but to try to interpret it, remember it, memorialize it. And I'd encourage us to today follow Paul's exhortation in Romans 14:19, pursue peace and mutual upbuilding. I'd encourage us also in the future, as we next session, with potential of waging campaigns against other flags and other monuments and other symbols, that we reflect back upon Paul's exhortation at that point too, to pursue peace and mutual upbuilding. And let's let South Carolina's history be South Carolina's history. Let's let the memorials and the monuments that we have erected and adopted and embraced to interpret it and understand it remain. Sometimes in understanding even some of the most egregious acts, that's where you get the most insight into where you've been, why you're where you are right now, and where you should head in the future. That's the reality. I'd implore us to pass this bill today in the pursuit of peace and mutual upbuilding, and in the future, pursue that same peace and mutual upbuilding, and not engage in some of the battles that we see raging all over the country right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator from Greenville.